Hey, what's going on, guys? Let's jump into some trade recaps. I haven't done many this week. Pretty successful week. We've had some really incredible trades. First one that comes to mind here is Netflix. We ended up taking the 600 calls for March 1st. So these were 2.41. Today they hit a high of $1,100. So basically 240 bucks to 1,100. I only had one. Do I regret that decision? I guess if you talk about the money that or the value it went to, yes, but at the time I wasn't too sure, so I'm okay with it, right? Whole basis behind this trade obviously stemmed from this peg, right? So power earnings gap, where we had a very large gap up in price from earnings, right? Where we ended up kind of getting into this new range, if you will, kind of dispatching of this old range, and buyers want to obviously protect their progression, right? And then what we ended up having, and you guys can see I have my fibs drawn. Sorry if it's too light for you. I'm not going to change it, but you guys can see I drew it from low to high, right? And then as we started to sell off a little bit, you guys can see volume tapered off very easily. Nothing to be really scared of in terms of being a bull and losing all your gains and this jeopardizing the peg gap that was created. And really it ended up pulling down into a very good spot. If you guys remember, I had like a green zone drawn here, and really what I was looking for was this to retrace on low volume to a discounted array where I felt like calls would be at that midpoint, right, discounted, and I was looking for the 618 bounce. Now what we ended up getting was this flag look, pulled right into the 618 on this day here. I remember we ended up gapping down just a little bit, and we ended up sliding down to 553. Now, if I go back to that day specifically, I'll turn it on with extended hours. You guys will see, right? We ended up getting, I think it was here, yeah. So on this day here, we ended up gapping down just a little bit, and we opened underneath the 618. So I wanted to see us reclaim back above and then pull back into it. You guys will always see me do the same exact thing. I always draw this, right? And then I look for an expansion off of that level. And obviously, if it fails, it fails. You close out of the position. But that comes down to your time. I guess what your trade is. If you kind of categorize it a swing trade, a day trade, it depends on your expiration and how you like to obviously choose your candles. 5-minute, 15-minute. If it's a swing trade, hourly or daily. If it's really long, maybe a weekly close. But this ended up doing exactly what I wanted. You guys can see it broke out back above the 618, and what did it do? Right? We can just draw a quick little trend here. Boom, boom. Not the most perfect flag, right? But it did pull back down into our spot, right? Something like that, where it gave us a nice little flag, low volume still, right? The high volume breakout did occur here, which gave me kind of the sign like, okay, hey, this is obviously it is a level, right? They're trying to get it above the 618. There's a buyer that probably stepped in here via shares, or I'm sure people were buying options contracts as well. I don't check flow, so I didn't really know, but this pushed out on high volume, had a strong close, and then it pulled back down. This is actually where I ended up taking the calls, right around here. And all I was saying was, hey, I'm going to risk a daily close under the 618. It was that simple, and ended up pushing out one more time and gave us a very weak new high, unfortunately. And then it sold back down, right? Ended up hitting the 618 again, gave us a lower high or kind of like a 2-bar bear flag, and then sold off one more time. And this is where I was a little bit like, oh man, maybe I should just close this. I think I was down about like 90 bucks or something like that. Nothing super crazy, but I was down like 90 bucks. And then of course, the last saving grace, right? We ended up getting a bounce, right before the previous low, or I guess the intraday low, which was here. We ended up getting a big buyer that stepped in kind of near the end of day, right? In between these last two candles. And what did it do? It pushed us right back above the 618. Now, this is what I was saying. Hey, like this was not a hairy trade because, we had till March 1st. I only had one contract. It wasn't a stressful trade, but I didn't know if this was deemable to be able to say, hey, this is a definitive close over the 618. It looks super strong. I'm going to buy this, right? It was more so like, hey, if we go to the daily, right, kind of held on by the skin of its teeth, right? This daily candle held just slightly above it. Volume wasn't super crazy once again. You guys can see it was still pretty flat, so I was worried that we might see more downside. But you guys can see the following morning what ended up happening, right? We ended up opening above these daily highs here, or no, we opened slightly below it. We ended up ticking down a little bit, but we held the new gap that was created, right? And I was gonna likely hold this the entire way, but I would have really been upset if we gave back this gap here. But we held, right? We ended up pushing back through. We had an open, low, high, and then I was expecting a close. Obviously, we pushed all the way to 580, and then we closed just below 580. So I held the position still, really strong close, uptick in volume. Candle looks strong itself, and then obviously today we opened low, high, close, really strong close again. I wish I would have held it all the way, but right, this really didn't jeopardize breaking 480, or I'm sorry, 580, which was the initial high of the range, right? And this gave us the exact look we were looking for. Put this image in your brain, you'll see this form time in and time out, right? If we were to inverse it, this is what it would look like in terms of like a bearish one, right? Where you have this big gap down, right? It starts the bear flag up. You guys can see it retraces to the 0.618, the 0.5, puts become discounted, and then this is the same exact thing, right? But beautiful, beautiful setup. I wish I would have held for like the last little portion of this because I think I cut like right around here and it gave us like an extra like 10 points or so. We already had a 30, 40 point move from entry. So like I said, I took these from like 291 to like 79 or 8 or something like that. They did reach a high of like 1100. But it is what it is. I'll take it, right? My target for this trade, even though I had the 600 calls, was here. And that's where I started to kind of, I even gave it a little extra to get through. But solid, solid trade. I hope you guys took Netflix. I know some of you guys were in. If you cut a little bit early, it's okay. But just remember, it's okay to let things trade to target, especially when things have momentum like this and the candles are extremely strong. Volume's pretty weak on the sell side. There was no jeopardy of this really coming in, or I'm sorry, no jeopardy of them coming in with high volume to really break this below this level here. If anything, right, it would have been a simple stop out under the 618, but that did not happen. That was a really good close where they fought back above, and then you guys could see it was lift off from there. So nice trade on Netflix. Let's take a look at the next one. Secondly was QQQ, right? This is another big one that we ended up hitting where we had runners that I think peaked at like 230%. Closed those as well with Netflix, but this was a good trade, right? The fundamental aspect of it was this gap down that stemmed from here, right? So we had this high where it kind of swept over the previous week high, right? This is Friday and this is Monday. Monday open, right? Kind of broke above and then closed under and really swept out anybody that was looking to trade a breakout over previous week's high. Okay, and then we ended up gapping down due to CPI, and really, right, I felt that we'd trade back up, obviously, and I've given you guys a little bit of insight into this. There was a ton of buyers that bid actually on Friday that were bidding down here, but once we saw CPI kind of come in, we saw prints show up midday and via pre-market, right, where they were placing asks and trying to sell a large amount of premium, a large amount of shares up here at 434.98. And really we ended up kind of pushing down, and I was waiting actually for some kind of indication to get into this, and it started right around here, right? I think this is when I ended up triggering the lotto, and this was the initial trade, right? The quote-unquote lotto. I only had, I think it was like 8 or 10, maybe 12 contracts. Nothing super crazy, but I actually started it right here off of this random hammer, right? It wasn't random. I knew that there was a buyer here, level 2, but also that was a level that was heavily bid, right around 425.50 to 425.30. This was a signature print on Tradie Ticks, but I saw the hammer kind of form here. The new low as well. As you guys can see, this low happened to be the initial low. We ended up bouncing off of it, gave a really weak, kind of like lower high. Once again, 2-bar kind of bear flag, if you will. And then it sold under, and then when it sold under, it didn't really create separation. I always talk about that. If you get a new low or a new high, there's not a lot of separation. There's not a big expansion followed by heavy volume. Got to be careful chasing those, right? Especially the retests of those. If you try to go retest and short it or go long off of it, you got to be a little bit iffy on it because it could just be a fake break and you might get pulled back into the range and stopped out. That's kind of what happened here, right? These guys ended up going short underneath it. Yes, I guess it technically did retest this here on this 15-minute candle, but once again, like, the breakdown wasn't that high of volume, right? It didn't really create that much separation with this candle that broke the low. It retested it, but then the next candle, right, didn't really follow through with high volume as well. And then if I go to a lower time frame, I'm sure this actually, right, if I was like on a 5 or a 1, I'm sure a lot more of the volume actually ended up being what formed this little hammer candle, right, and then pulled it right back above the close, right, of the previous candle, right? So open, close. That's why this is technically a green candle, right? But hammer, higher volume than the sell, right? At least this one on the retest. Not necessarily. It's pretty close actually to the breakdown candle, but we end up getting, a nice little formation right here. I ended up going long and just risked the low here, and then we got a big breakout and push right back into the range, right? And this is where I said it's scary because you can get not necessarily caught in a short squeeze, but this will be a quick trajectory towards one of these pivots here, whether it's a lower high. People like to look at this as like EMA flips as well, but this is a very, very quick trajectory to try to get a trend flip, right? Especially if it breaks into that range, people will kind of freak out, and that's how you can get those short cover rallies that you end up seeing, or capitulation sell-offs, if you will, and really aggressive moves. But this is exactly what we saw. You guys can see the volume here going into end of day, right? Got a big move. I think these went like 30 or 40% even before the close, and then the next morning, right, we had a nice gap up. The gap up really sent us to the previous day high, right in that range here. And then this is where that that one trade stemmed from. I talked about in Gavin's Discord, kind of the same thing, right? We didn't really care because it was almost the same story, right? Where you ended up having an open, right, and then it broke out and then sold off. And I think a lot of people were thinking you'd get the same exact move as this move here. But all it really did was give a orb high breakout, faked people out there with no real retest, and it sold under, right? But the same exact thing happened. Literally the same exact thing, guys, if you can't see it. Let's get rid of this 429.85 level now. Here's our initial low, right? This little black line. What ends up happening as this fades underneath the low, right? You guys see aggressive volume coming in. I guess you can say this candle, but there's a wick here that's stopping price from going lower. The break under the low, is it super aggressive volume? Is there a big, big low, right? Is it a massive expansion between the low a day and the new low? Not really. I would say they're putting up a fight here. And then the next candle, it breaks back above, right? Closes over it. Next candle, you start to get really tight action, right? Last candle here, it sweeps underneath it, and then it closes in a hammer. Now, I'll admit we did have an edge here because if you guys want to go back and back test it, I was looking for the 428.80 level because that was a dark pool print via the bid, right? So buyers were sitting there in the dark pool to look to buy price, right? Huge amount of money. I think it was 1.8 billion. And of course, they might have grabbed it a little bit earlier. They got pretty damn close, so might as well. But it pulled under, right? Got back above and closed, right? So we're now getting very, very minimal lower lows, and now the last low got swept, if you will, right? And closed right back above, higher volume. So somebody might have gotten trapped, and then what ended up happening was a breakout, pullback, breakout, pullback, right? And it's kind of holding the initial low now. So now sellers that were short here, right, are now stuck. Obviously, this is now acting as a new support. And then what ended up happening? Another liftoff, and we ended up trading higher. Okay, and then we ended up breaking the. I would say we'd probably prioritize at this point, not the initial high, right? The orb high. It would be this high here. So got a really nice trajectory straight up towards 432.65, and then obviously we pushed up, and that was tail of the tape. I remember this morning, I probably could have gotten more money just closing here into the high. It's all good because I ended up closing this here along with Netflix, but this ended up selling back under and then consolidated and then broke out and pushed to that dark pool print that we ended up having from Tuesday, right? Yeah, this is the 434.98 level. It pushed right to that, and then obviously kind of struggled with just a little bit right on the first half, maybe a couple other 15-minute candles here, and then ultimately ended up, I think, absorbing it maybe and kind of broke through and is now acting as a support here. But two sick trades there. Both of those were good. The lotto and the re-entry here. really fundamental aspects to my trading. Once again, just not only just like kind of using the edge of the dark pool prints, but just being patient. Your best trades are always going to come from failed breakouts or failed breakdowns, and it's just being patient, knowing where those could potentially set up at, waiting for other people to make mistakes. That's the biggest thing of trading, is other people are going to make mistakes. There's humans trading on the other side. So being patient and letting those people fall apart first, and then being able to, understand what you're looking for, right? People love shorting lows, people love shorting breakouts. But if that breakout isn't worthwhile, right, and it's not giving you the risk isn't meeting the reward, and it's not giving you that huge move that everybody's looking for, and it just kind of incrementally makes its way down, people are probably going to cover and be like, hey, this isn't working. There's not a lot of sellers here. We're not really creating distance. If they try to place their stop and it's coming back up and tagging them out, people are probably going to close out of that position, right? Or in turn, maybe flip the calls or whatever the case may be. Got to be able to notice those things, tie them into your candles, tie them into your volume. And it tells you a story, right? You don't always have to time bottom necessarily, but I didn't have to get in here when it tapped into the dark pool print. There's a very, very valid and probably better entry here, right? Once it got back above, it ended up breaking back above. I always talk about, hey, like, you don't need to catch bottom, but at least look for the signs, right? This is a sign here. So this would have been, maybe not an entry, but hey, there's a buyer here. These guys might have messed up, right? And this is the kind of where they're looking for a price to stay under. It ends up breaking out, and then it pulls back down. What happens? It's now support, and it gets pressed out, comes back down again. They can't sell under, right? This is where you see anybody that shorted into this little area here, they're going to give up, right? And that's what you see, right? And this probably would have been the safer and better entry, right? And then if we end up taking a long off of this, let's just say we get in at the line here, right? And our risk was simply the low, and then we're targeting the high, right? That's a 2.87. We wouldn't have had to have trimmed till high a day. Really safe and sound risk, right? We kind of know exactly where the buyers are putting their foot down. It would have been a way better trade in my opinion, because this is definitely risky. This is how you can catch bottoms and have higher percentage gains, but are they worth it? Does it only work 2 out of 8 times that you do it, 2 out of 10 times, whatever it may be? Or would you rather take something that's not as lucrative but pays out more consistently, right? Maybe you hit this 6 out of 10 times. You miss 4. I'll take those odds any day. So that's the only thing I probably would have corrected with this trade. I think I just got, I told you guys what was happening in the other Discord. I think I just wanted to look cool to take the bottom. I did have some pretty damn good size on this one though, so that's the only minor correction I would make with this one, is just let the buyers establish their foot, wait for it to break back into the range, right? Because this was the initial low, becomes support. I probably would have taken entry here. Let it pop out, and then remember it pulled back one more time. Some people would freak out because they could see gains from here, right? And I'm sure coming up to this spot here, if it's 0DT, that might be like 25, 30%. But if you have a couple extra days on it, maybe you see your 25% win now trickle back to entry. That's hard to see sometimes, right? You'll be up $300, $250, and now you're only up 12. People will just close. But once you're in a trade, you got to realize you got to see it through, right? That's the whole point of a risk reward, the whole point of a planned system. And then once it pulled down, right, you maybe even could have took ads here once you saw these kind of close here, right? Close right around that level. The wicks wouldn't have scared you out either, because you know that you're going to lose down here. So you would have, had the patience to let these candles close. You would have seen this one close, and then you could have probably added even as this was making its way up. Yeah, you would have upped your cost basis, but into a winner though, right? And then let it push out to 432.65, I think it was. Would have been a huge win. So that's the only thing I would have changed. But big win on Qs from both the lotto and the intraday alert for that as well. So I think I had one more. Let's take a look. Alrighty, guys. Final piece of the puzzle is complete. Friday is out of the books, so I can go ahead and do the recap for that. I only took one trade, so it wasn't anything crazy, and it was only one contract. It was OPEX day, and a lot of things were leading to the fact that I wanted to short. The day prior, I actually did stop out for a small loss on starters, right? Initially, what the chart looked like was this, right? So if we end up pulling this little black line here, I'll make it red so you guys will know. But this was actually the previous week high, this little red line. And then Monday ended up opening, and then it gave a fake breakout over the top, sold into CPI, and then it had a low volume climb the entire rest of the week. that was the whole reason that on this day, right? So on Thursday, I took like 3 contracts shorting and risking 501.74, right? And then I ended up closing those. I think they went 20%, didn't they? They went 20%, and then they pulled back, and then I got stopped out. And then again, I took them kind of into the end of the day, and then it closed above, and I stopped out again. I think I lost on the first try. I lost like $9. The second try, I lost like 60 or something. So it's all good, but really, right? It never gave like a strong close over, if you will. If you guys could look at the volume here, not very strong, barely closed over the top. But we were going into PPI, and I was just worried we'd get like a rip like that, and then not even pull back, right? Maybe just kind of do something like that. But that's why I got rid of this line. I was like, okay, so it's pretty much just going to come down to the high, right? 503.44. That's the all-time high. That's the, the I guess the fake break high, if you will, from this weekly high. And everything was pointing short. If we talk about it, right, we had the fake breakout to the upside. We sold down into CPI, which we had a huge gap down, very high volume, and then it started to make its way up on lower volume, right? And if you guys know, this is just very simply what you're looking for. Obviously, I would have liked to have had this candle be a much higher volume candle, but nonetheless, right, this is what you'd look for. You have a high, you have a breakdown, you have a weak bid that pushes it back up, and then you fail just shy of the high. That's kind of like your lower high. This is very similar to AMD. If you guys remember that, we recently just traded that and have been all over the weakness on that chart. But it was looking for the same exact thing, guys. I was adamant on this, like failing, doing the same thing, a fake break above 503.44 and selling off, or I was looking for, right, it to fail that same exact spot here, right, this 501.65. Okay, that was pretty much all I was looking for. So. And let's talk about targets, I guess, as well. If you guys remember the day prior, so on Thursday, there was that huge gamma pull down to 498. Now, that's people piling into that strike, right? There's a lot of premium going into that. There's a lot of, gamma that has to be hedged for. And typically that stays on until, right? Usually these people into Thursday are trading into the Friday expiration. So that wasn't going to come off the books until Friday. And I knew that was just sitting there. So that was obviously a reason for price to kind of get pulled towards that direction. And then quite simply, it was the 9 EMA, right? Because you can see here the little green line. 497.7 was the exact mark, right? But you guys should know there are institutional levels. We always want to round that. So 498 was the spot I was looking for. And that was pretty much it in terms of target. Now, if we dive into the the lower time frames now, you guys will see, right, as soon as the market opened, and this is the crazy part, I told you guys I was going short. I was like, okay, I'm looking for a 1.5 fill. I unfortunately got a 1.6, which isn't the worst, right? It's not crazy. I think the low of the contract is only 1.3. I don't even think that. I think I pretty much got. No, it was definitely 1.5. So I was pretty close to the bottom, but right off the open, right, I just went short and I risked essentially this level up here. Right, remember the 501, whatever, 65. I think it was 501.65. Right around there, right? So we kind of opened right at that spot, and I was just gonna risk a break above. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize it was. Now I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Was it 501.65? I'm pretty sure that was the previous week level. Anyways, right? Yeah, because we barely got it close over the top. You guys can see here. Okay, so I'm not crazy. But we ended up opening slightly above it. We pushed out just a tiny bit. This is where we got our fills, and then it sold under, and then it kind of held, right? This is essentially the entire move. We got this all the way down, and I was looking for it to come to 508, or I'm sorry, 498. And I'm kind of glad I cut where I did because you guys can see it didn't get all the way down to our spot. It got there to like, what was the low? The low ended up being 498.75. Like I said, I cut a little bit shy. 75 cents is, that's not a full dollar, but it's pretty close. So I could have captured a whole nother delta point. But it's all good. I ended up getting about 200% on this. Made it, I think it was like $400 a contract or $300, something in that range. And then I was really focused on Tesla, but it was really easy. I really don't think it was anything out of the blue, right? I mean, I talked about this nonstop, right? This is, oh yeah, here we go. So the weekly chart, you guys always want to, especially if you pump over a previous week high, previous week low, you leave like a new week opening gap to the upside or the downside, and you pump into that gap on a Monday, and then you kind of pull back and create that daily trap look.
it's always going to try to, you always want to mark that and you always want to use that as kind of like your gauge going into the rest of the week. So once we opened on Monday, faked that out and sold back down, I kind of knew we were going to trade back up into this spot. That's why I was saying I was looking for low volume leading back into 498, 500. You guys can go back and look. I said this was going to happen early week, but it was about, do we want to short that? I absolutely want to try shorts. I really do. Remember, I've been talking about, and it looks crazy now. Where is it at? We have to go to the daily chart for this. Remember, this whole range right here, I am still of the belief that this is distribution, okay? Like I'm still almost certain that this was the beginning of the distribution phase. And then what we started to see here, right? What do you guys think this is? I still think this is all UTAD up here. I really do. I'm almost certain that this whole blue spot is UTAD. So I've been like looking for periodic ranges to short in. And then I think whenever it's time, man, it's going to be a huge, huge sell-off. It's going to be big. I think we do come down to this 476.5 range, without a doubt. But right, I've just been looking for little bits and pieces to short off of. That's, I guess, the long story short. I've been looking for those Monday pumps, and then sell back down, and then for it to re-rally back to the highs, and then looking for that weakness near the highs to short again. Unfortunately, it usually ends up being on like a Friday, so it's always a little iffy, because Fridays usually don't have that much data. Not wrong. We don't really have anything crazy. So sometimes there's not anything that really sparks the sell-off. But this was a pretty good one in terms of it being OPEX, right? We had a really easy short, in my opinion, on the chart. Look, if we go to the 5-minute again, let's get rid of the blue. Like that was pretty simple, right? And then it kind of just sold off right away. And then it pushed back up, slightly broke for a new high, pulled back higher low, and then you guys can see the weaker higher high. And then I think this is where they really started to. And if you guys didn't know, they were very call saturated in the market. I think it was like 8-1 or 8-1, 7-1 or something like that. So those calls do have to come off the books. How do they do that, and how do they stay delta neutral? We talked about it. They are short call, long put, and then they sell equity, right? And I think that's why we saw such a crazy. And usually that equity selling comes in some of the bigger names that have been leading the rally. If we go to SMCI, I don't think it was any mistake that we saw this thing get absolutely purged. NVIDIA, I'm pretty sure, had almost the same function. Yeah, AMD. So some of the names in the semis that had really been leading the way pretty much saw pretty terrible sell-offs. Apple was pretty much the same story initially off the open, right? It kind of fake broke out above 185. Actually was looking for that long over 185, or I'm sorry, 184.49. I just didn't trust it, so I never actually pulled the trigger. But yeah, I was good read on that because literally the same thing, right? Kind of a fake breakout, sold off, lower high, pulled back, and then it had a huge sell-off in a day again. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty easy setup on SPY. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I was just looking for shorts the entire week, or I'm sorry, yeah, looking for shorts early beginning of the week on the CPI. Obviously, I traded AMD instead, which ended up being a nice win. And then I obviously traded long, going back up into that, kind of not the imbalance necessarily, even though it was a gap, but making its way back up towards that weekly high on low volume. That's what I wanted to see. That's what we ended up getting. And then I tried to take my shot, like I said, on Thursday, and it didn't really work. Mind you, I kind of knew that I was shorting it without much confirmation because it was either between 501.65 or 503, right, which was the previous week high and then the all-time high. This whole little range here, and yeah, and then Friday we finally got our open, right? We kind of, you guys can see, we almost opened, pre-market. We were in the spot up here. We were very close, and the fact that we sold back down, got underneath the 501.65 again, I was like, okay, I know what to do, right? So I ended up shorting this, nice win, and that was pretty much end of story. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I don't really want to go into too much detail besides that. I was going to talk about like Tesla, Tesla, but that's a new, fresh position. Some people are asking if I added early. I don't think so. I think we're fine, right? I think this was the spot to be early, right? If you added early, yeah, you didn't really have much confirmation and risky, right? I think Tesla, there's been a lot of opportunities to add. First one that comes to mind, like if you wanted to be an early bird, was this gap here, right? Why did people add here, right? And it obviously it gapped down going into earnings and it sold underneath. That failed. There was another opportunity, I believe, up here. Remember this one, 225 if I have it correct. Yeah, the 225 level. Remember it sold down and swept out these daily lows here, and then it held on a single day. This was a good spot. That failed. So there's a lot of things that have failed if you tried to be a Tesla bull over the last like couple weeks. And I just didn't want to risk this 618 and try it again and then it failed, right? And then obviously it popped, hit 194. Remember I tried to go long because this was the end of a week, right? Yeah, this was Friday, and I remember I tried to go long, hoping we got a gap over. I took like 3 contracts, hoping that we get a gap over, and we didn't. Next Monday, we ended up opening right below and then tapped it and then sold back down. But then we got like this little, inverse head and shoulders look. I'm not going to trade it off an inverse head and shoulders. As I've been, specifically saying, I want buyers to prove that they're actually going to hold a huge level, right? And of course, the inverse head and shoulders caught. This is our second higher low. It has a huge rip through. We end up breaching these sellers here, and all I wanted to do was have us close above this on the weekly, right? And I wanted this candle actually to pull back a little bit deeper. If you guys remember, I wanted to get this to pull back like that. And why 196? It's very simple. The gap fills here. But you don't really want this to come back down and test the gap because there's a more important level, right? And it's this 194. This level is huge, huge, huge. But if we were to pull this down, I guess it's pretty close, right? It's 193. I don't, it'd be difficult if it ends up selling back down under 194. I might just risk 193 if I'm being honest. But yeah, you want to see 194 hold. But then, thinking from there, right, you have this clear pivot here. 196. So just have a small zone, 196 to 194, where I'm okay letting this kind of pull back, and you'd want to see this hold in this green zone, and then from that green zone, you'd want to see, obviously, it pop back out, fill the gap, right, and then maybe you get like a smaller higher low and then break out, and we're looking for 220, and then we're looking for 248. So that's just a quick little recap there from the week. Nothing, this was a very easy week in my opinion. I hopefully everyone did good. I know a lot of people did really well this week. I slowed it down a ton. I didn't trade a whole lot. I think I only had like 6 or 7 trades. I think I might have had 6. Yeah, and that's, I mean, if you take away DKNG was just a lotto trade. But other than that, that was just an earnings report, which did suck, right? DKNG, if we can talk about that, that was brutal. We were right. This was earnings, and it sold all the way down to where I thought it would, 39.35, and it was just an equity buy, right? Whoever was down here just purchased it back up, and yeah. And then this was the craziest part is we got in up here, right? Remember, we ended up taking it right around this little red line break. The fact that we ended up opening and sold all the way down to 41 again, and we were pretty much in the money, right? We were pretty damn close. And the fact that we still got IV crushed on a March contract was a little upsetting. I ended up taking a 40% loss, but it was only one contract, so I lost like 90 bucks or 60 bucks. I think it was 90, but that wasn't that big of a deal. But that was unfortunate because that would have been a really nice little, frosting to add on top of the cake. But that is pretty much it, guys. Really good week. Same thing next week, man. I'm really just going to be focused on Rivian and Tesla. Those are probably going to be my major focuses next week. And then I think here, right, I just said it, QQQ and, SPY. SPY's a little bit better with my drawing here. I think we're seeing the final stages of the UTAD here. So I'm going to be looking for those longer dated puts too, honestly. Or we can sporadically take shorts. But just in my mind, I think it's now to start looking for shorts on SPY. And if we can get this down to 494 next week, I would love that. Under 498, I'm looking for shorts to 494. And then obviously under that, 490. You guys can see, man, like I have so many different blue lines here. These are those major dark pool bids that are sitting. So, I mean, 494 is one, 490 is another one, and then 487.5. We have another one at 482. This is the range down here, right, where I think a lot of it gets pretty hard to break through. We'll see how big of buyers step in, but the old all-time high at 480 to 482.42, that's going to be a big spot to get through. And then if you can fade through that just a little bit, I think 476.5 is our last target. And then we'll see what happens from there. But Yeah, well, I'm just gonna take it bit by bit. So it does sound a little weird, but I think Tesla's gonna start outperforming the market. But yeah, I really just want to focus on Tesla, Rivian, and then start looking at the indices short. I think we're gonna see a lot of weakness in AMD, and I've been saying it over and over again. I do think Nvidia is gonna finally see pullback as well. Just the way SMCI sold off, the way ARM's been trading, I keep saying we're gonna see a lot of froth get sold off and shaved off a lot of these names. And there's nothing wrong with it. You want to see pullbacks. You want to see people be able to be investors and buy comfortably at levels with, I think there's some safety that should be involved with this as well. It's a little ridiculous on a lot of these names. So we'll wait. We'll take a look and kind of see what ends up happening in the semiconductor industry this week because it's going to be big with Nvidia, who does report on Wednesday. So remember, short week. So Monday we have off. Tuesday is a trading day. Wednesday, I think the whole market's going to hold still. Honestly, I think it's going to be a flat day across the board. Um, so yeah, this is the biggest report I think that we have. Usually it's Apple, usually it's Amazon, but nah, I think it's Nvidia. It's dictating almost all of QQQ in my opinion. So that's gonna be it, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the recap. I did a little extra talking at the end, so I apologize, but that'll pretty much close it all out. Hope everyone has a good weekend, and I got a workshop if you guys end up wanting me to do that. If not, I have some videos ready to pump out as well. So, all right, guys.